In 1610, a man sent a painting to Rome. Not as a gift, not as a commission, as a plea. The man was a murderer, a fugitive. He had been living in exile for 4 years, hunted across the Mediterranean by the agents of a powerful family seeking revenge, and by the official sentence of the Papal States that had declared him an outlaw. His name was Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio, and the painting he sent to Rome showed a young man holding a severed head. The head was his own. To understand what Caravaggio was doing, you have to understand what kind of man he was and what kind of life had brought him to the point of painting himself decapitated and sending it to the most powerful man in Rome as a request for mercy. Caravaggio was born in Milan in 1571. He was trained as a painter from childhood, and by the time he arrived in Rome in his early 20s, he already carried something that most artists spend their entire careers trying to develop: a completely uncompromising eye. He saw the world exactly as it was, not as it should be, not as the church wanted it depicted, not as the noble patrons who paid for paintings preferred to imagine it. Exactly as it was: dirty, beautiful, violent, tender, sacred, and degraded, often in the same face at the same moment. He was trained in the Lombard tradition of naturalistic painting, but what he did with that training had no precedent. He went into the streets of Rome and he painted what he found there. Not idealized biblical figures with classical proportions and heavenly light falling on perfect skin. Real people. Dirty fingernails. Weathered skin. Broken veins on the nose of a drunkard used as a model for St. Matthew. The calloused feet of a pilgrim given to the apostles. The specific face of a Roman street prostitute used as the model for the Virgin Mary. The church commissioned him constantly and rejected his work almost as often. Too real, too human. Too much of the smell of the actual streets outside the church door, and not enough of the elevation that sacred art was supposed to provide. And Caravaggio didn't care. Or rather, he cared enormously. About the work, about the truth of the image, about making you feel the weight of the painting in your chest when you looked at it. He just didn't care about the consequences. His technique was as radical as his subject matter. Where his predecessors and contemporaries used sfumato and soft transitions and idealized light, Caravaggio used chiaroscuro so extreme it had never been seen before. Figures emerging from absolute darkness into a single shaft of light so specific and so physical, it felt less like a compositional choice and more like a flashlight beam in a cave. The shadows in his paintings are not decorative. They are structural. The darkness is as real and as heavy as the figures it surrounds. The light does not illuminate. It interrogates. He was painting interrogations. Every canvas was a room with one lamp and one subject, and the question of what that light would reveal when it fell on a human face. What it revealed, again and again, was that the sacred and the degraded were not opposites. They were the same thing, seen from different distances. The angel visiting the saint had the face of a Roman street boy. The martyr's death looked exactly like a murder because it was. The Madonna had the swollen face of a woman pulled from the Tiber. This was not blasphemy. This was theology of a kind the institutional church was not prepared to handle. Through all of it, the violence continued. The historical record of Caravaggio's life in Rome reads like a police blotter. Brawls, arrests, assaults, a lawsuit over a woman, a street fight over a tennis game, a confrontation over artichokes that ended with drawn swords. He was arrested multiple times. He wounded several people. He was the most famous painter in Rome and the most dangerous man at any dinner table he sat at. The two things were not unrelated. The same intensity that made him incapable of painting anything other than the truth made him incapable of walking away from a confrontation. The same refusal to soften or idealize that made his paintings unlike anything that had come before made him a man who could not let an insult pass, could not accept a hierarchy he hadn't chosen, could not submit. We have seen that quality before in this channel. In the angel who refused to bow before something made of mud, in the poet who put his enemies in hell by name, in the painter who encoded a heresy in the most public wall in Christendom. Caravaggio was not the first genius who could not stop himself from burning everything down. He was just the one who did it most literally. On the evening of May 28, 1606, Caravaggio killed a man. The man's name was Ranuccio Tomassoni. The circumstances are disputed: a brawl over a gambling debt, a street fight that escalated, possibly something more premeditated involving a woman both men knew. What is certain is that the fight was violent, that Caravaggio received a serious wound himself, and that when it was over, Tomassoni was dead. Caravaggio fled Rome that same night. The sentence that followed was the most severe available under Roman law: capital sentence in absentia. He was declared a bandit, literally outside the law. Anyone who encountered him could kill him on sight and collect a reward. No trial, no appeal, no return. He was 35 years old. He was the most famous painter in Italy. He had just thrown all of it away in a street fight. The years that followed were extraordinary in their darkness and their productivity. He moved from Rome to the Alban Hills, then to Naples, where he found protection with the Colonna family. Then to Malta, where through extraordinary connections he was admitted as a Knight of the Order of St. John, one of the most prestigious honorifics available in the Catholic world. It was, briefly, a path back, an institutional rehabilitation. If a man could be a Knight of Malta, he could eventually be pardoned by the Pope. Then he assaulted a senior knight. The exact circumstances, again, are unclear. What is clear is that he was imprisoned in a cell carved into the rock of Fort St. Angelo, and that he escaped. Nobody has ever satisfactorily explained how, and fled to Sicily. The Knights of Malta formally expelled him. They declared him a foul and rotten member, struck from the rolls of the order. Another door closed. He moved through Sicily, Syracuse, Messina, Palermo, painting in each city with the driven urgency of someone who knows time is running out. The paintings from this period are among the most harrowing he ever made. The figures are thinner, the darkness deeper, the faces haunted by something beyond the biblical narrative they are ostensibly illustrating. He had seen too much. He had done too much. It was in his brushwork now. By 1610, he was back in Naples, desperate and dangerous. He was attacked, possibly by agents of the Tomassoni family, and left badly wounded, his face scarred. There were rumors in Rome that he was dead. He was not dead. But he was running out of time, out of cities, out of options. The papal pardon that would allow him to return to Rome alive was theoretically within reach. He had powerful advocates. Cardinal Scipione Borghese, the Pope's nephew and one of the most important art collectors in Rome, was a devoted admirer of his work and had been working behind the scenes toward a pardon. The Colonna family, who had sheltered him in Naples, had connections that reached directly to the Vatican. But a pardon required the Pope's personal approval. And for a man who had killed someone in a street fight, who had escaped from a Maltese prison, who had left a trail of violence across 4 countries, a pardon required more than advocacy. It required a gesture. He painted David with the head of Goliath. The painting is oil on canvas, approximately 125 by 101 centimeters. It shows a young David, barely more than a boy, standing in near darkness, holding the severed head of Goliath by the hair. The scene is biblical. The story is one of the most famous in the Old Testament, the shepherd boy who defeated the giant with a single stone and cut off his head. Caravaggio had painted the subject before, earlier in his career. That version showed a confident young David, the head of Goliath an accessory to his triumph. This version is completely different. The young David is not triumphant. His face is sorrowful, almost compassionate. He looks at the severed head not with the satisfaction of victory, but with something closer to grief. His arm extends outward, holding the head away from his body as if he cannot bear to look directly at it. And the severed head of Goliath has Caravaggio's own face. Not approximately, not metaphorically, his specific nose, his specific jaw, the dark circles under eyes that have seen too much, the open mouth, the glazed expression of recent violent death, a face that is immediately recognizable from the one surviving portrait we have of him, from contemporary descriptions, from the features visible in the reflections he painted into his earlier work. He painted himself dead. He painted himself as the monster, the enemy, the giant who needed to be killed for the world to continue. And the young David, the hero, the righteous, the instrument of divine justice, the one holding the sword, has the face of a boy named Francesco Boneri, known as Cecco del Caravaggio. Cecco had been Caravaggio's assistant and almost certainly his companion for years. He appears in at least 2 other Caravaggio paintings. He was, by all accounts, devoted to the painter who was his master and, in some sense, his protector. And in this painting, Cecco holds his master's severed head. The sword David carries is inscribed with letters H-A-S-O-S, a fragment of a Latin phrase from the writings of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. Humilitas occidit superbiam. Humility kills pride. Or in another reading of the phrase, the humility of salvation overcomes the pride of Goliath. Humility, salvation, the killing of pride. Caravaggio, the man who could not bow, could not submit, could not let an insult pass, whose pride and rage had defined and destroyed his life in equal measure, painted himself as the embodiment of pride brought low. He painted the person he loved as the instrument of his defeat. He inscribed the word for salvation on the sword, and he sent it to Rome. This is what the painting is. Not a biblical illustration, not a demonstration of technical mastery, though it is that, too. The light on the 2 faces, the darkness surrounding them, the psychological complexity of David's expression are among the greatest achievements of his entire career. It is a confession, a public, permanent, painted confession from a man who knew that words were insufficient for what he needed to say, who had spent his entire career communicating truths that could not be spoken directly, who knew that the most powerful thing he could offer was not an argument or a petition or a promise of future good behavior. It was a painting of himself dead, held by the person he loved with the word salvation on the sword. This is what I am, the painting says. This is what I have been. I know what I deserve. I am asking for something I have not earned and do not deserve and cannot claim by right. I am asking for mercy. The pardon came through. In the summer of 1610, Caravaggio boarded a boat heading north along the coast toward Rome, carrying paintings as gifts for the advocates who had worked on his behalf. He never arrived. He died on July 18, 1610, at Porto Ercole, a small coastal town north of Rome, under circumstances that remain mysterious. The most likely cause is fever, possibly malaria, possibly an infected wound from the earlier attack in Naples. Some historians have suggested he was murdered, some that he simply collapsed from exhaustion and illness on the beach. He was 38 years old. The pardon arrived in Rome shortly after his death. It had been granted. He had been forgiven. He never knew. The painting he sent remains in the Borghese Gallery in Rome. You can see it today. You can stand in front of it and look at Caravaggio looking back at you from the hands of the boy he loved, his mouth open, his eyes already somewhere else. It is one of the most honest self-portraits ever painted, not because it shows what Caravaggio looked like, but because it shows what he believed he was. A man of enormous gifts and catastrophic failures, a man whose eye for beauty and truth was matched only by his capacity for destruction. A man who spent his life making the sacred look human and the human look sacred, and who in the end could only ask forgiveness by making himself into an image. The severed head in David's hand is a masterpiece. It is also a prayer. The most Caravaggio thing imaginable, to make the two indistinguishable. If this changed the way you think about what a painting can be, share it with someone who thinks art is just decoration. And if you want to go deeper into the artists, the confessions, and the masterpieces that contain the truths we were never supposed to find, subscribe to Hidden Canvas. The head was always his own.